Hey, I'm Candace Scalise for CBS 21 Next, and today we are talking about how a non-US citizen was able to vote in the 2024 election and what local counties are doing in response. So I want to bring in Andrew Klein, who has been working on this story since last week. So Andrew, bring us up to speed here about what the Department of Justice released last week regarding this non-citizen voting in the presidential election.
Right. So, quick breakdown of what we learned on Friday was that a man who had been living in the United States, according to the DOJ, undocumented since 2000 when he was ordered deported, was actually caught or allegedly having voted in federal elections. Specifically, the 2024 one is the one that we're focusing on right now. So, this man is arrested, charged with fraudulent voting. He faces up to 5 years in prison because of it.
And he was in the US since 2000
Yeah.
and was ordered deported, but stayed and then somehow was able to vote in the election. That's correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So now what? Who are you talking to today about this? Because I think that this is obviously a concern for some people of feeling like the elections aren't safe, of wondering if people who aren't even alive are voting, and then wondering if people who aren't even citizens are voting. So, what have you found out today after speaking with some local officials?
Well, it's really interesting, Candace, because if you ask different people, they have totally different views. If you ask somebody on the left, for the most part, the response has been, it happens once. It's not really a big deal. On the right,
Okay.
the response is, well, it's happening once. It's got to be happening, multiple other times behind closed doors. So earlier today, I met with the Lancaster County Commissioner, Ray DiAgostino. So we talked a little bit about election integrity, what the process looks like for people that are trying to, vote in United States elections, how they are able to, get that process situated, and how this happened, how this person that is an undocumented person living in the United States was able to fall through the cracks and ultimately get a voter ID and vote.
So, what were some of the answers that he gave you today as far as the safety of the election process and how it all works?
Yeah, his confidence still remains relatively high in
Okay.
the current election system. So good news there. However, he did recognize some of its flaws. One of them being that, this is a system that's been around for a number of years already. So there could be people that fell through the cracks 20 years ago when the technology isn't what it is right now with background checks and things like that, that could have allowed already a circulation of people. Now, what normally happens when you go to apply to vote, or to apply to register to vote, that is, the first thing you see is a question: are you an American citizen? And a yes box and a no box. So you could tell the truth, you're an American citizen, and the process continues. You could lie, and then you could potentially face prosecution in the future, which is what we're seeing now. Somebody who had lied on their application to register to vote, and we are now seeing, obviously, this person be arrested and potentially charged. And sorry about that. So what Commissioner DiAgostino and I talked about today was he does still have confidence in the system because the system is designed to scope out people that try to do this. However, you got to tell everybody that your vote matters no matter what, and it has to be able to be ensured that the people that are not U.S. citizens, that are not eligible to vote, do not have votes that count. Because if that doesn't happen, then how is anybody supposed to believe that their vote counts? Why do they vote? And it becomes a whole big snowball from there.
Yeah. Okay. So, if you check that I'm a US citizen, but you're not, did he talk about what happens next? Because obviously, there's more paperwork you have to fill out as far as your address, so on and so forth. What's stopping people from lying on their form?
I mean, there's background checks, of course, but at the end of the day, if you have a fake ID and you've lived somewhere for a number of years, whether that ID again is real or not, you can lie and say, yes, I'm an American citizen. You fill out the whole form and you go through, and then once the form is processed, that's when the background checks are done. Federally on higher levels. Once you send in your application to vote, so with this situation, you know, it's he was, I believe he had, fake documents. Obviously, we know he's been living in the United States for many, many years. So he then lied, was able to, I guess either create a fake ID or get a fake ID. And the other thing is, though, Candace, back when, 20, 25 years ago, the system didn't necessarily call for a photo ID. You could also, or a
Just
social security
changed.
number. You could
Right.
use a tax identification number. And that's one of the things that Commissioner D'Agostino talked about, because if you had that, it didn't necessarily make you a citizen to have that tax number. So the tax number being used could have been used by non-citizens, and then that could have been another way for them to fall through the cracks. And this is something that they could have seen, many, many years ago.
So we're also saying with this specific case, this man who was arrested could have voted in past elections too,
Yeah.
because the documentation was already in the system. And so it was easier for him to just go through with it. This could have been, I know we don't have that confirmed, but I'm just trying to think of how it all works. So this could have been an instance where he was just caught.
Right.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the big question is like, how did it happen? And that's something we still don't know from the federal investigators and the Department of Justice who released the information on Friday about the fact that this undocumented immigrant voted. And then they're trying to figure out, how it happened.
Right.
So we're still waiting on that. So is the commissioner you spoke with advising people one way or the other when it comes to election safety? Or I guess with this, it's like, if you don't believe elections are safe and then this happens, it's like, well, there's proof.
Oh, well,
So
this
what
is,
is he saying?
I'm surprised that this didn't ignite like a social media firestorm, because, this is a story that you would think social media would take and would run with. Both directions would take it and run with it, far, because
Right.
these are the things we've heard about it for so many years. 2020, the election is stolen, and the election so now we have, this alleged person who is arrested for fraudulent voting. You would think that, one would turn into a bit of a snowball. The thing that I heard from Commissioner D'Agostino, I want to try to read a few of his quotes to make sure I know exactly
Yeah,
what
sure.
what it was. He said, "I think our elections are secure, but there are instances where things slip through the cracks because of the way the system is set up." Now, he also talked about, he does think that it's important for people to know that their vote counts. And so that is what I grasped was his, reasoning for continuing to prosecute people that are potentially have voted fraudulently. Because if you say one single vote by a non-US citizen counts the same as a US citizen, a lot of credibility is lost. And if credibility is lost in American elections, we've got
Then what do you
a
have? You don't have your
massive problem on our
democracy.
hands.
Right. Yeah, it's really interesting. Did he say anything about anything he thinks needs to change since things do fall? I mean, obviously, no system is perfect, right? But did he address anything as far as this needs to change to make it more secure, or, because things have slipped through the cracks, does he foresee anything in the future that could prevent that from happening?
Well, I mean, everybody kind of understands the SAVE Act is one of the big things we're talking about in politics in Congress right now, and the vote and the back and forth on the SAVE Act. Now, I did not ask specifically if he, is pro SAVE Act, or what he feels on it, but we did talk about it a little bit because it's one of the things that the government is trying to implement to avoid situations like this. Now, we know the SAVE Act is not perfect. If it was perfect, it probably would have been passed by now. A lot of
Yeah.
people on both sides agree that some sort of voter ID is needed. But it's about, getting to that spot that is the issue right now. So how do we change the system? That is the question. The system itself, for the most part, I feel like he feels like it works
Okay.
because, just talk about Lancaster County specifically. A couple years ago, there were a ton of allegations of fraud, and they were actually sniffed out by, Lancaster County and the attorneys general. So he talked about that, and he knows that the people in Lancaster County specifically, those are the people he could speak for, know what they're looking for when they go through these applications. But, with the guy that we've been talking about from Philadelphia, there are so many different factors that go into that application that, and it could have been from many, many years ago that led to that specific one falling through the cracks. But overall, again, D'Agostino did seem like he is relatively confident in United States elections. And for the most part, this is not something that we have actually had evidence of being a widespread issue. Could that change? It could. Anything could change. We don't know what could change. But, with this specific thing, there's a lot of confidence in U.S. elections still. but the importance of, if we find out there are people that are illegally voting, we have to go at them, because you cannot allow anybody's vote that shouldn't count to count. Then you lose all integrity in the elections. And again, that's a whole nother problem that no country wants to face.
Sure. Yeah. Really interesting. I'm glad you were able to talk to him today, just to talk about specifically Lancaster County, how they're responding, and his thoughts on this. Anything else you want to add as we wrap up our discussion today?
I think the one other interesting thing is we don't actually know who this person voted for. The person who was caught,
Right.
Mahadi Sacco is his name, 50-year-old man from Philly. We don't know who he voted for. So, people reserve judgment on just about everything. This one is relatively black and white. This is somebody accused of fraudulently voting, and that's what, to me, this should be looked at as, and not, who did he vote for, what side was he on, or anything like that. There is an issue at hand, and if this issue is happening in the country, we have a problem, no matter which side it's benefiting and which side it's is getting the short end of the stick.
Sure. Yeah. I hope, and I don't know that we will. I don't think we're going to get a lot more from the Department of Justice. Hopefully, as their investigation continues, we can find out more. But I know that we just have limited information from them about this specific case. But it does beg the question of, if it's happening in Philadelphia, is it happening in my county, in my municipality where I'm voting to, kind of thing. So I appreciate you talking to him and figuring out just what happens next, as we have the elections coming up this November too. So a lot can happen between now and November. So we'll see how that transpires. And also mentioning the SAVE Act too, which doesn't look likely to pass, but I don't know. You
never know.
I don't know what's going to happen with that.
Something like this could also change things.
True.
You never know.
Yeah, 100%. All right, cool, Andrew. So we're going to talk to him a little more in depth tonight at 5:30 and 6 on CBS 21. And you can always follow Andrew on social media and follow our website, cbs21.com, to get all of the information. We do have the story linked with the first release of this article, when Andrew first learned about this on Friday, and is now digging a little deeper to see how it's impacting our local central PA counties. That's it for us today on CBS 21 Next. I'm Candace Scalise. Thanks for joining us.